Cognitive biases are faulty generalizations to which all humans are prone. On the one hand, they help simplify our complex world and deal with a potentially overwhelming amount of information. On the other hand, sometimes these generalizations oversimplify our worlds and lead us to faulty conclusions. Let's look at some examples of important cognitive biases that we should be aware of that affect us all. The first cognitive bias we'll discuss is stereotyping or essentialism. This is a cognitive bias that many of us are already familiar with, as it underlies a lot of problematic ideas such as racism and sexism. This cognitive bias occurs whenever we assume that one feature of people generally predicts other features. The next cognitive bias we'll talk about is in-group bias. In in-group bias, we assume that people who identify with the same groups we identify with ourselves are more likely to be right, and people that identify with rival groups are more likely to be wrong. This cognitive bias underlies things like partisan political divides and religious schisms. Confirmation bias is a cognitive bias that happens when we assume that claims that agree with our already held worldviews are more likely to be true, and claims that disagree with our existing worldviews are more likely to be false. This kind of bias underlies conspiracy theories and similar kinds of motivated reasoning. The last cognitive bias for now is the bias blind spot. This is unfortunately the easiest bias to fall prey to, thinking ourselves less prone to all of these things than others. In reality, we're all very prone to making such errors. There are many more cognitive biases that I didn't have time to talk about, but I encourage you to read more about cognitive biases and how to think more critically.